Welcome to Women in Leadership Talk, where you'll hear from successful women who are empowering other women with their stories of adversity, resiliency, and success. And here is your host, Vicki Bradley, founder and CEO of Women in Leadership Empowered.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for chiming in today. We're grateful to have you here, and we have a lovely guest joining us all the way from Chicago. Maria Doughty is here with us today. So Maria, thank you so much for coming into the show.
Thank you, Vicki. Thank you for having me, and thank you for all that you do to really help women and other people in terms of leadership roles.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And you know what? I feel like the lucky one. I feel so blessed that I get to have amazing guests on like yourself and to hear your stories and the experiences that you've had. Because you and I both know, we were talking about this earlier, but you and I both know that this is how we support many, many others, whether you're women, whether you're men, it doesn't matter, but it's how we support others as well. So let me give our audience a little bit of background on you so they have a sense of why I invited you on the podcast today. So Maria is the president and CEO of the Chicago Network, which is an organization dedicated to women's advancement in the workplace and representation on boards. Her role puts her at the helm of Chicago's premier leadership organization, including 500 plus women at the forefront of the city's business, professional, cultural, nonprofit, and educational communities. We're very blessed to have you on the show, and we know your vision is gender equity for women of all colors at all levels everywhere. And I love that. And so when I read your profile, I was like, okay, Maria and I need to get to know each other because we do seem to have the same sort of passion for advancement of women and helping women just find their voices. So I'd love to kind of start with maybe you sharing with the audience a little bit about your background and what you were doing that has led you to the Chicago Network.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Vicki. So from the outside, I would say my background prior to the work that I do now seemed to be maybe conventional, but actually, if you do a little bit of unpeeling, you'll see that my past definitely shaped my future. I think most of us can say that if you have some time for reflection. I'm the daughter of Italian immigrants who came to the United States with very little formal education and no English language skills, by the way.
Oh, wow.
But they had grit, they had perseverance, they had determination, and a tremendous work ethic. And let me add that they are two of the smartest people that I know. And thankfully, they're still with me and with my sister and I. So I learned really, really quickly that I could use my voice to affect change for myself. And then I realized that I could use that same voice to affect change for others. And that is what led me to the legal profession. And I'm an attorney by trade. And I worked in law firms at the beginning of my career. And then I was very, very fortunate to find an opportunity in a Fortune 100 corporation where I spent 23 years. And I held many leadership roles at that company during that time. And which is really kind of, when I reflect back, I really think it's why I remained in the company for so long. I was never pigeonholed into one space. And I always counsel women that, you really need to look 5 to 7 years. Like every 5 to 7 years, you need to really assess, is this what you should be doing? But for me, the reason why I stayed for so long is they kept moving me into different roles and promoting me and giving me different leadership opportunities every 5 to 7 years. So it worked out perfectly.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I love that. And I love what you just highlighting. That is very important message, because so often you'll hear people say, oh, I have to leave the organization. And it's not always about leaving the organization. It might be leaving the role that you're in. And when you get that itch, sometimes you need to scratch it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think women tend to be more fearful about, making that jump. And I often mentor, and I'm sure you coach people, not just women, just people to say, sometimes it's a scary thing to do, but I guarantee you there'll be lessons learned from that experience. And the reality of it is it's always continuous improvement for me. So it's, what have I learned and what can I learn when I make those jumps? And it is scary, but for me, the way I look at it is you have to try to embrace fear. And that is not always an easy thing to do, as you know.
Well, it's not. But what I heard you say there, though, is that importance of learning, right? So it's that curiosity and continuing to exercise all aspects of your brain. And it's so funny you say this, Maria, because I was reading a quote this morning and I wrote it down because I was like, I love this quote. And it was, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I heard you say. Like, you were in the same organization for many, many years, but they kept moving you to different aspects of the organization, which stretches you, which challenges you, and kept you engaged in the organization.
Absolutely correct. And I think the other thing I'll just add is that, and I feel very strongly that particularly women should do this, but everyone in a leadership role. The company allowed me to be engaged civically. They kind of celebrated my civic, and they supported my civic leadership itch, which I think really led me to what I'm doing now. You know, leading this organization of these 560 plus women, an organization that has been around for more than almost 50 years.
Wow.
And the purpose is empowering women to lead. I mean, this was, to me, an easy move for me. And, you know, many people, when they ask me, you know, what did you do? Right. Because I mean, and wait, I have to share this one fact, because this is, talk about crazy. I signed and negotiated my contract in February. So I signed my contract in February of 2020 with an April 2020 start date. So as you can imagine, I don't think I was prepared to have shifted my whole life and my career during a global pandemic, but it turned out, and you and I spoke about this before, you know, I don't believe in coincidences, to be quite frank. And I really believe that the timing was so ideal because it allowed me to be able to really support these women so that they could really be the best leaders that they were, because they were dealing with so many challenges within their life. And these are women, these are CEOs of big companies, not, you know, Fortune 50 to, you know, entrepreneurs who are running their own business to, you know, presidents of universities, but everyone, the themes are all the same. The challenges that they had are all the same. And during that period of time, they needed each other more than ever. So that was a really important piece of what I thought was an incredible, perfect timing. It was definitely the silver lining for me during the pandemic. And, you know, I think at some point you would ask me about, you know, why did I get into this passion about female advocacy? And I think it's really, it's an interesting story. I think that the things I'll pull from it is I realized very quickly in my childhood, quite honestly, that relationships mattered, and that relationships were going to impact my opportunities and the advancement. And I recognized that as a small child. I mean, my parents didn't speak English. I learned English fundamentally in kindergarten. And so it's by the grace and support of teachers and mentors and coaches in my youth that helped me realize, okay, yeah, these are the relationships that I can, you know, maximize and use to be able to figure out what the next steps are. And it really taught me how to develop strong personal relationships. And you know this, that's especially true in business. It couldn't be more true in business. And people want to work with people they like, and people want to work with people they trust. Now, of course, in most businesses, you have to have a certain skill set, right? I mean, you do not want me, right, you know, doing anything, filing your tax returns, right? I mean, I can interpret tax code as a lawyer, but you don't want me mucking with the numbers. But really the depth and length of the relationships is what I've learned create this connection, and every interaction is important. And, you know, now we talk about it, we call it networking. Back, you know, when we were younger, no, that wasn't a word. Networking wasn't a word, but now we call it networking, for lack of a better word. And what I noticed in my professional career was that women were not using their networks, their relationships for themselves. They were tending to use them for others, which is beautiful, right? Women we are that
We're so giving.
We're so giving. And it's admirable, of course, but honestly, it does not lend to what I have been talking about a play to win approach.
Yeah.
And it is so important that women shift the narrative in their brain as to this play to win approach, particularly those women who want to see themselves in more senior leadership roles in companies and serving on boards, right? In independent board of
Exactly.
directors. When I was in my corporate role, I joined the Women's Employee Resource Group, and I recognized that we were stronger together. And I was very fortunate at that point. I served as president of the ERG for 2.5 years. And during that time, we doubled the size of the membership to like from 2,000 to 4,000. We ended up taking it global. So we had women from all over the world. And I mean, I know you are a global person because you've got so many connections internationally. And what I realized in that role is that all the issues that these women were facing were all somewhat the same. Yeah. And it didn't matter what level you were at. It didn't matter what country you were in. It didn't matter what language you spoke. Fundamentally, women were all facing the same challenges. And we talked about this too. They asked the same questions. Yeah. I mean, oh my gracious. And they had the same insecurities. They had the same fears. They didn't have a strong professional support system. They were losing promotions to men. They were juggling personal and professional, and they were feeling that they were failing at one or the other.
Or all of the above in some cases.
And so I realized, for me, we talked about this too. What is the problem we are going to solve? Like, look at the problem we're going to try to solve. And I realized this is not an impossible problem to solve. This is not ending hunger, which sadly, as much as I think if the two of us got our, rolled up our sleeves and got it done, we could do it. The women are going to solve the hunger problem.
Yes, we do.
This is the one we can make a difference in. And so I moved from this corporate role into this nonprofit role. And now I have these 560 extraordinary women who I have one voice, but if I can maximize and amplify all these power women, then I create a butterfly effect within their organizations, within their communities, within our nation, and within our world. So that's kind of my path.
I love it. Your passion is just exuding on the screen and on the audio right now, because I know not everybody listens to it from a video perspective. And I love your passion. And yes, we have so much in common, Maria, because that's exactly why I created Women in Leadership Empowered, right? It's like, how do you leverage all of those things that are so important? Your networking, your peer-to-peer mentoring, the coaching, but also the skills development. So you've said a number of things, and I want to key in on some of those. I have my own thoughts, of course, because of the work that I do as well. But these themes that you talk about, they are global. But let's talk about a couple of those. Like, what are some of the things that you see, regardless if you're an emerging leader, you're a senior leader? What are some of those themes that come up?
Let's talk about perfectionism for a second, because I think it's a really important one. What I have noticed is that women tend to have want to be perfect, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not just in the workforce. It's they want to make sure that their physical appearance is good. We care about the community and the world we live in. We care about our physical surroundings. But this theme of perfectionism, which really exists in so many women, is really hard. I mean, it drives us in ways and it creates and it causes us to do things that we would never have even considered, that you would never coach somebody to do, right? And I'm going to give you an example that we talk about all the time and it still happens, this concept of women don't apply for positions or promotions unless they meet 90% of the requirements, right? That is in the work that you do. And I'm saying this and it just, as like, I roll my eyes. I'm like, I can't believe we're still saying this. Like, haven't we shaken ourselves from this? Because we know it's a fact. But I swear to you, I was talking to a woman recently, and we were talking about transition, which is a whole different topic, which I'm sure you've done a lot of work on, and the transition women make, whatever it is, right? I just talked about my transition in a way, but so she was talking about transition, and she started saying, well, I don't think I could do that. I looked at her, I was like, wait, what? Like, you have just led a global company of, a $50 billion company, and you're telling me that you don't think you can do this? I mean, if not you, who? I just couldn't imagine it. But she just needed to hear someone say, oh my gosh, you are right. I have to shake myself out of this. And it's so much more important for you to hear it from someone else sometimes. And sometimes it has to be truly an objective voice. And I'm very much a big believer on coaches, because I think they're very important. They serve that role for many people, but that's absolutely one example. I mean, I'm curious to hear, like, kind of like, if you've seen that. I know
so many times. Yes. Yeah, 100%, Maria. I think that is a big one. And some of that is the fear. Some of it is the aversity to risk, which we talked a little bit about earlier, right? Like we tend to be more cautious. But it's that fear of not being accepted, right? And sometimes the way I like to position that is, well, if you don't apply, you'll never know, right? So, and I agree with you. There's a big part that it's, what are the internal messages, the internal stories you tell yourself, right? That you are enough. And what does that mean to you? And reminding yourself, like, there's this one author, she wrote a book called How to Toot Your Own Horn Without Blowing It.
Yeah.
Peggy Klaus. She's unbelievable. I love her. And I use her work a ton. And I've had her into my mastermind groups and stuff. But she talks about the importance of keeping track of your brag bites, right? Because, to your point, we forget what we've done. I will ask clients this all the time. How was last week for you? What were you able to accomplish? Nothing really. And then you start talking and it's like, really? Nothing? You accomplished nothing? Like, are you hearing what you just said to me? And then you rhyme off all of the things that they've done. But we're so internally hard on ourselves that we forget that how important it is to celebrate those wins. And to your point, it doesn't matter how big or small, but you got to celebrate those.
That is so important. So important. Acknowledging your achievements is so important. And, it's interesting because I have coached women, and even when I do, even with everyone that I've had, all my direct reports, I would always encourage them to keep basically a diary, a narrative of everything they've accomplished during the week. And the reason why I shared it with them, in addition to this, I think the bigger issue, or the bigger rationale of really kind of overcoming some of these, these fears, is that when you're doing your performance review and you have to do your self-evaluation, if you're in whatever the role is you are in, to go back and actually be able to see everything that you've accomplished week by week within the year is, first of all, makes you writing your self-evaluation incredibly easy. Second of all, it's really, it's kind of a shock to your system, or at least it should be a shock to your system of, oh my gosh, I went through that process when I was deciding whether to transition from the corporate into the nonprofit space, right? I mean, when you're going through a transition, a job transition or a career transition, you need to make sure your LinkedIn is up to date. You need to make sure you have an updated bio or resume or CV. And I remember when I sat down because remember, I'd been in the company for 20 plus years, right? I was always on the other side of the table. I was not, I hadn't interviewed for a job in forever. And so when I started, like sitting down and saying, okay, what have I accomplished? I literally drew a blank. I was just as you said. And I had some pretty big achievements in my leadership roles in over a couple decades, but it was really hard. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Keep track of all those wins, celebrate the wins. I think, challenging that negative self-talk,
Yeah.
and shifting from rather that I can't do something to I can. And it's easy for us to say, much more challenging to do. I think, to me, I'm just going to put a plug for like a Chicago network. I mean, find your Chicago network.
Yeah. I was going to bring that up actually. So keep going.
Yeah. So I get this question a lot. So we're an invitation only organization, and there's a reason for that. We are very focused on making sure that the women we bring into the Chicago network, and there's no floor, no ceiling, by the way, we are peers of one another, because we want to make sure that they're truly having the same experiences, and that they feel like they're in a safe peer group. And so that's why we're so careful about our membership.
Love it.
But I watch, oh my gosh, Vicki, when I watch these women together, whether it's 5 of them or 500 of them, it's just so beautiful to watch, because they're the support and all that. It is magic. It is magic. And that's why it's sustained for almost 5 decades. Women need to find their Chicago network. Yeah. And unfortunately, it's only in Chicagoland. So if you want, you got to come to me. You got to come to Chicago. But I actually, interestingly, you may know or maybe not, but there's a new mayor. The mayor, she's not new, but there's a woman mayor in Philadelphia. The first female mayor in Philadelphia. Crazy town, right? To think about. Mm-hmm. And there was a wonderful journalist who reached out to me and said, "Can we talk? I heard about the Chicago network. It sounds incredible. Can we talk about it? Because we need to bring a Chicago network to Philadelphia." Nice. So my ultimate vision is to have a Chicago network in every major city in the world. But until that time, you have to find those areas and connections that, cohort groups that you can join where they are truly peers and you have a support system. Yeah,
no, I love that. And you talked about that a little bit earlier. And I want to highlight this because I have the same philosophy. It is about building relationships with people like, and trust, because you do business with people like, and trust. And networking, a lot of people shy away from it because they think it's a transactional situation. And if you're doing networking that way, I suggest you learn how to do networking the proper way, because it is very much building that relationship. Transactions happen from that naturally, right? Because of the know, like, and trust. But the importance of having that community is, like, you going in during COVID, like that was a pivotal time, right? Because so much uncertainty was happening and so much unpredictability, and everybody, I think at that time was like, what are we doing? Where are we going? And so when you can find your community, your base, your foundation, then everything is going to be okay. Right. And if you're a woman ready to take that next leap, whatever that is, having somebody who's been there that you can tap into to say, Maria, how did you do that? You moved all these times in your organization. Like, having that person to really unpack it with becomes so important, because it also builds your confidence to say, well, yeah, I can do that. I don't have to question my skills. Right. And women, we are awesome. Like, we truly are awesome. And so we need to step up to more of that, because we could solve a lot more of the world's problems. But I think that, some of the things you said about the things being consistent across the globe, yes, I hear it as well. Doesn't matter where you are. But how do we start to overcome those things? How do we really believe in ourselves enough to know that, yes, we are at the right place and we're here to support each other?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the only thing I'll add on the community building is make sure that it is a diverse community.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is, I'm a lawyer. And so I've been involved in lots of female women's organizations, legal organizations. They're wonderful. They're supportive, but I challenge you to build your network with people that you don't normally interact with. So I love my astrophysicists. I love my research scientists. These are the people that I would never have ever connected with, outside of being in the network. So find those experiences, those opportunities where you can interact with others. And I'm married, I told you, to the most amazing man. So men are allies, and you need to find those men as well to be able to create that really, really broad network that you could then ultimately tap when you need to tap it. I think the other thing I would say is that really embrace failure. And this kind of goes back to that perfectionist piece. It's so important that we recognize that setbacks are opportunities for growth. And that's really hard. That's really hard when you have this perfectionist viewpoint and we want to be perfect for everyone. And we didn't even touch on sometimes why that perfectionism exists in our psyche. Each of us have been impacted by various levels of trauma in our life. Some are very profound. Some we may not even realize were traumatic events, but the reality of it is that you have to learn to give yourself a little bit of grace. It's the hardest thing to do, but it is the most powerful to give yourself and then to give others grace. I think it's always harder to give yourself grace. It's easier to give others grace. But when you fail at something, it's okay. And it's hard. That one's a tough one. You're the coach and you've done this. That was the one that I think you need a coach to help you walk through that failure piece. And then I think the other thing that I'll add, because I think this is really important and we don't talk about it anymore because it kind of got off the radar. And then I think it's an important topic. Overcoming these obstacles and fears is building executive presence.
Oh, 100%.
But we don't talk about it anymore. Vicki, we don't talk about executive presence anymore. It kind of was a taboo for a while. I'm not quite sure why. But I can just tell you when I'm physically wearing something that brings me joy.
You're like taller, more confident. Yes.
Yeah, I'm in. Or when I know that I have really prepared for something so that, to me, that's also executive presence, where I've prepared and I'm ready. And I think it's really important for women to recognize that is still a very key component to how they can overcome some of these obstacles that create self-doubt and, this fear of backlash and this belief. We didn't even talk about this one, the belief that women, we're told at a very young age, just do a really good job. You're doing a great job. Hard work alone will get it to you. They just assume,
don't make waves.
No, you assume efforts are going to be noticed and that you don't need to advocate for yourself. Well,
wrong.
No.
Wrong, and wrong.
You still have to do good work. That is
not, of course,
that's table stakes. But that's not going to get, gosh, I can just tell you so many stories of women
I know.
who, even me, who are told, you're doing a great job. You're next in line on promotion. And then I find out, wait a minute. What happened? I didn't get that promotion. But some guy got the promotion. And then I find that he was actually playing golf with 3 of the guys that made the decision on the promotion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be visible. Yeah. It's funny you say that, Maria. So I do want to unpack a little bit there, because when you were talking about the executive presence, leadership presence, call it whatever resonates. A little bit of controversy, but I think where that has kind of gotten pushed to the sideline is because of authenticity, because we're also saying you need to be your authentic self, bring your whole self to work. And I only bring that up because last year I was doing a speaking engagement at a financial institution. And one of the women in the audience brought that up. She said, well, I know I've been told in my performance reviews that I don't have the leadership presence. And so I'm looking at her, and she literally had on like a track pant kind of thing. Yeah. And I said, well, how you show up matters. Not just not just what you say, but it's how you make people feel. It's what you're wearing. And one of the people that was on the panel with me, she said, well, Vicki, we're telling everybody they need to be authentic. And I said, 100% you need to be authentic. But you also have to recognize, how do others perceive you? If you show up authentically in your sweatpants and you're in a professional environment, how do you think people are going to perceive you? Not very professionally. So like it or not, yes, I want you to be authentic. Yes, I want you to be vulnerable. I want you to show up fully as you, but there's also ways to do that. And it's a fine line. And I often will coach people who say, I've been passed over for promotions. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about why. And just one example, I had an executive was looking to become partner, and she kept getting passed over, and they weren't really giving her concrete feedback. Right. And we were sitting in this session together, and she got her little notepad out. She started taking notes, and I said, okay, stop. I go, I want you to really pay attention to what your presence is right now. And she was like, well, what do you mean? And I said, okay, I'm sitting across the table from you. My impression is you're the note taker.
Uh-huh.
You're going to summarize our entire session together. I don't need to do anything. And you've made yourself very, very small. And she was like, what? And I go, if you're showing up in your meetings like this, and she was in a very heavily male dominated industry. I said, if you're showing up that way, they're seeing you as the note taker or the person who's going to grab coffee, not the peer, not the partner. So we spent time working on this, and she did make partner last year. Yay.
Excellent.
Yes, which is a big win. But I share that because I think people get clouded by authenticity versus presence. And presence is everything about you. It's your verbal, your nonverbal, how you make people feel. It's all of those things rolled into one you. And so I had to go there a little bit, Maria, because I feel like that's where some of that has gotten lost, because people are like, oh, are we vulnerable? Are we authentic? Or are we, executive presence? Yeah. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, Vicki, it's so important. And I think, authenticity is one. I think they could write books and books and books and books on, and there's probably 1,000 case studies that you can talk through. And then of course, vulnerability. Now I've been talking about vulnerability as in controlled vulnerability, because I don't think, I'm dealing with these very incredibly amazing women, very powerful, influential women. And I see little pieces of vulnerability, in publicly, externally. Right. And to me, it's controlled vulnerability. And they give, I think the really successful ones give enough to make people feel like they are seeing glimpses of them that give them that level of authenticity. But when I look at authenticity, it's like, if I'm on a Zoom call, I don't want to see you in your pajamas. That may be your authentic self, but no, not what would I want to see.
Yeah.
But maybe, and one of the things that I have been talking to women about, particularly women who are sitting in leadership positions, is, okay, so when you get into the start of a meeting, do you just jump in, or do you just take a breath, even if it's for a minute, and say, how are you guys doing today? And a sincere, how are you doing? Or how was your weekend? With a sincere, how are your weekend? But it's not so much even just asking them how their weekend was. It was about, well, I ended up shoveling snow because we had snow on Saturday in Chicago, and that's what I did for the weekend. I couldn't believe it. Like, you're just giving a little bit of glimpses of making yourself
real,
human.
Mm-hmm.
We're all human, and we're all facing and dealing with the same things, which is what I think for women, we are uniquely positioned, because we tend to do that really honestly.
Yeah.
And that's what I think when you think about the great leaders, right? When you do a survey and say, name me five top leaders, right, in the world, whatever, they always have compassion.
Yeah.
They always have highest level of integrity. Sometimes you'll get that they're empathetic, but compassion is the big one that you'll hear of the great leaders of our time. And we've kind of lost compassion a little bit.
Yeah.
We kind of forget that that's just as important. And I roll that into authenticity as well.
Lovely. Oh, I love that. See, we knew that this time would go really fast.
Oh, we're done? Oh my gosh.
Because there's way too much to talk about.
Yeah.
But I just before we wrap up though, I want you to really maybe share one thing that you really want to make sure our audience leaves with today. We are predominantly a female audience. We have some men, definitely. We're being listened to in 50 plus countries around the world, which I'm so grateful for. But if you could share one or two things, Maria, what would you want to express to this audience?
The first thing I would want to share is if you have aspirations to be in a C-suite role, and I'm talking about president or CEO, it is absolutely critical that you own a P&L. It is really important for women not to shy away from doing that work. And many women tend to be in roles that are more what I'll call shared service roles, right? So you have roles that you are an expense item on the cash flow ledger, right? And that's wonderful because as a lawyer, all my mentors, and I was mentored by some of the most incredible senior leaders in my company, they only saw me as being the chief legal officer. Well, I really had no interest in being the chief legal officer. I wanted to run one of the huge business units that actually had had national presence. But they didn't see me that way. And so all the paths they were steering me to was towards this in the law department. So I would say number one is, if you have those aspirations, get a P&L, find an opportunity to own a profit and loss. Understanding how to make money is just as important as how to spend money.
Definitely.
Responsibly, right?
Yeah.
So that's the number one thing I would say. And sometimes that means you have to take a lateral role. That means you may have to take a step down to take 10 steps up, or it may mean that you have to leave the company that you're currently in and find another opportunity to own a P&L. So that's number one. Because for me, when I look about our purpose of empowering women to lead and our vision of gender equity, we are not going to see parity in the C-suite until we see more women sitting in those CEO president roles. That's number one. And then the second thing is this concept of play to win. I just want to kind of come back to that we need to change the narrative in our brains about, okay, I'm going to play to win. And, think about, you play a board game, Monopoly. When you go into the board game, you have a strategy on how you're going to win the game. At least I do. I go Park Place, Boardwalk, Utilities, Rail, right? That's what you want to get. And I go into the game knowing what my strategy is. Now, obviously, if somebody gets derails me somehow, I have to pivot and strategize. But we need to remember, particularly women, that we need to play to win. So those are my two.
Love it.
That I would leave you with.
Love it. Those are two awesome ones. And just on that last point that you made about play to win, it is recognizing it is like a game. It's a chessboard, right? And you're making different moves. And so it's understanding and recognizing that that's what it is. And that's in all aspects, right? So yes, love that. Love that. Love that. Wow. Okay. And I loved your comment on controlled vulnerability, because that can be more digestible for some people who keep things close to the heart. But it's also an important message, I think, for those who share everything. So it's a good balance with both. So love that too, Maria. Wow. Thank you. Our time went so fast.
It did.
Yes. Lots to talk about. And, thank you for the work that you're doing. Like myself, women are so important to us, and really, the male allyship that you talked about, we can't have one without the other. And so it's really embracing that. And how do you make that more a part of your life instead of trying to repel it? I think that's a really important message as well. And just thank you so much for being here and for doing the great work you're doing at the Chicago Network.
Oh, right back at you. Thank you. It has been so much fun and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you. And audience, thank you for being here. Please leave us a review. Let us know you like us. That's how we keep doing these amazing podcasts. And thanks for chiming in from all over the world. We're super grateful for that. And we will, well, let me see. One more thing before I close us off here. Those of you who listen to the show often, you know we offer a free leadership quiz on the Women in Leadership Empowered website. So go on, take that quiz. It'll give you some insight how you're actually showing up in the world. And we talked a lot about that today. So it's a great time to check yourself, see how you're showing up. And thank you again for being here, everyone. Take care. We'll see you at the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you for joining us for WIL Talk, sponsored by Women in Leadership Empowered. To learn more about our programs, please visit www.wilempowered.com. We look forward to seeing you in our community.